Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today we are going to be doing 4 ways with one stencil. Now really today's video is just to show you about changing it up and trying to get the most out of our supplies, all those things that are really sort of hot topics these days and hot words that are often used, but I just want to show you how versatile one thing can be. Now, I will say this is a gorgeous stencil from Trinity stamps called Space Fog. However, I would say you could probably cut a similar shape yourself. So you could cut this out of cardstock and then do something similar. Of course, it is nice to have the stencil. This stencil comes with the masks as well, which I appreciate very, very much from a company. And so this does give a really cool look, sort of used as is. Now, I will say a couple of things. One, I am going to use a grip mat for the stencil because the borders around the stencil aren't huge and I know I want to do a little bit of masking. But 2, this has obviously been used in lots of space. I mean, it's called Space Fog, and most of the examples that I've seen using the stencil, which aren't many, but I haven't had a good look into it either. Most of them show it being used space, with a space theme, which makes sense because it's called Space Fog. But to me, this just looked like a whole lot of fun. This looks like a really versatile stencil to me. And given its price point is around $6 or $7, it felt like a good investment to get so many different looks out of it. And again, if you're creating this with your own cardstock, then it's going to be great. A couple of good things about an actual stencil are the fact that they are transparent. It's nice and easy to glide over them when you are ink blending. If you make your own cardstock or if you go ahead and make your own stencils, sometimes the edges are a bit sharp and they also, they can tear up your ink blending tools and all those sorts of things. But this is going to be the first way that we use it, and it's pretty much, it's probably not as intended because it's not a space theme, but I want to take your mind away from what the original use may or may not have been intended to be, which was called Space Fog. So we're going to use this with some blues today. I have some ocean mist, and some powder blue. So basically, like a couple of blues and a teal, essentially. These are Gina inks. They are going to smooth out beautifully as well, which is going to help me with my ink blending. But in general, this is just a little bit of those 3 colors all sort of mixed together, and this looks fun. Like, honestly, this could be like a big drip or dripping or frosting off a cake. This could be waves, this could be the sand, the beach, this could be I don't know, my mind races when I saw this, and that's great. That's what I want to have when I see a product. And so I thought, you know what, let's work on this, let's expand and see lots of different ideas. So this is kind of how I would say it's semi meant to be ink blended, if not with exactly the right colors. This is going to be the next one. Now, ignore the colors that I'm kind of using. I'm specifically using the blues to get us away from the space theme, but honestly, imagine in some yellows and oranges and reds, or you could do what I'm doing here, except for you ink blend one, like we did the first one just here, and then put the mask over the first one that we had ink blended, and then ink blend the second one so that you could do contrasting colors, like a nice, yellow and purple, or orange and purple, or something like that to get a really, opposite. So that way we could use the mask as well and still be able to see all of the work that we're doing. But this one here, I'm pretty much taking the same pattern, but I just am not going to the edge of this, like right down to the edge of the stencil. I'm really using that baseline. And then here, I want to carry it on. So it looks like it's a continued stencil, although I've actually just turned it around and carried it on this direction. But to me, it looks like you've carried on the stencil. You can hardly notice any difference that I've actually changed it around. And then we're all of a sudden getting this beautiful ink blended look. Now I'm going to make some cards at the end of this just so that you can get an idea of how I would go about using these, but truly, I mean, you could use some of these layers with pastes, and you could add another stencil on top of the stencil. So do a double stencil technique where you add in patterns into some of these. And again, you could use the mask to mask off some and then pattern others. I do like to trim off the edges after I've ink blended, because no matter how much practice I get, I still get that slightly inky edge of which I just think I don't necessarily prefer. So I usually start with my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of cardstock, ink it up, then cut it down. So for this one, we just did the last one, which we were layering up over and over again, and then this one here I'm actually going to go around the outside and kind of end up not creating a frame, but almost framing something. I mean, if you did this with some light blues and then you could stamp some foliage over top, or if you did this with like some greens or reds and then added some Christmas bits and pieces on top, albeit a very straightforward design, I do think this is a very innovative and clearly thought out stencil. I really like this, and again, I like it even more because they have included the masks, so we appreciate that, and that they haven't hiked the prices because of that, so much appreciated. And as I said, this one kind of ends up being almost a little bit of a frame. I will say that I sort of, it's a little bit uneven. The frame is centered, not centered, and so I will fix that up. You could also layer in more inks like I'm doing up here, like layer in more swirls on top of what we've already got. I mean, it's endless, especially when you're using all 3 of these colors which blend together beautifully, and you're not going to run into any mud or mixing troubles. It's just really fun. This one here is going to be sweet and simple. All I'm doing is going to take, so I've got 3 different colors here, and I'm going to alternate between them and do the same technique, but just focus on inking up the edge of the stencil. Again, we're not using the entire space, we're just using these beautiful edges. And so we're doing a real mixture between all of these, following it down. Now, I actually do go out of order here, and that's okay because no one's going to notice at all. I end up just going back and forth between the 2 blue and teal, and then I realize I've forgotten the dark blue, so we come back in with that one. But as I said, these are just some very easy to replicate ideas, but a really fun stencil to work with. And honestly, as I said, when I saw this one, I thought, yeah, I've got ideas for that one. I can definitely see lots of different ways that I can make this work, let alone making this into some sort of space theme. Of course, that's a whole other feature. And I will say, with these blues and teals, it does remind me of the ocean, of the sea, and I think you could make some beautiful sea themed cards, but again, I veered away from those because that feels like the obvious that you could do with these, and I don't want to do the obvious, so we're just going to use them as regular beautiful card backgrounds and then turn them into some cards. So this one here, and again, these are all quick, easy backgrounds with very little effort, and a good blending ink does help, I will say. But a good stencil like this also makes it really easy to see through. It makes it easy to see how big the gap is between where you last inked and where you're next going to ink. These were fun. So these are the 4 stenciled backgrounds that we have created in just minutes. And now let's quickly whip them into some cards. So the first and easiest one that I'm going to focus on is going to be just a beautiful big sentiment in the center. Now, as I mentioned with this one, it was a little off center. So I actually ended up re-centering it a little bit, and then I'm going to use some blue ink to stamp this big beautiful sending you a big birthday wish. That is from the Gina Big Birthdays stamp set. And then I'm going to use this gorgeous Highland cow from the Highland Cows Simon Says stamp set. This one is gorgeous. Again, we're keeping these super simple. The backgrounds, although, not necessarily like traditional, land and sky or something that you might do behind them, this one probably ends up being my favorite card, honestly, but also just a beautiful stamp. You can do some silhouette stamping on top of these, and it's just a really funky, cool background. And I'm also going to use a couple of the little sentiments, and it says, "Herd, it's your birthday," with the herd spelt like a herd of cows. And so, again, really fun to put together. If you have other stencils or other stamps that you are having trouble with, you can always leave me a comment in the comment section down below, or you can email me. I mean, I love to hear suggestions and things that I could perhaps try and challenge myself with and work with. It's always fun to come up with new ideas with products that we already have. And actually, just while I'm thinking about it, with the blues, this would make a really cool, like, iceberg out in the ocean with some little penguins sitting on it or something. So that could be another idea. Okay, anyway, I could keep going endlessly. I have put a black matting layer on this because I did stamp out the Highland cow in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is a beautiful, clean, crisp card with that gorgeous background that we have created. And yeah, I like this one. And then another really quick and simple, easy one to put together. We're just going to do a little bit of heat embossing this time. I am going to be using one from a stamp set from Gina called Ornate Birds. And all I'm going to do is use a little bit of VersaMark sticky embossing ink. I have got the leaf here that the little birdie is going to sit on. And I did emboss it with some super fine gold embossing powder, and then I'm going to do the same with the bird. I did them separately just so that I could see where the plant or the stem that the bird was sitting on, so I could see clearly where to place the bird. But anyway, it has some gorgeous detailing through the bird. It's why perhaps they're called ornate birds, which I absolutely love. And then I'm going to stamp out a sentiment from that same stamp set. And then just for a little matching matting layer, I'm going to ink up one of my own. You could also, there's probably almost enough room, maybe not on this one, but you could do my little masking tape trick to pop around the edges. Here are these gorgeous Ornate Birds stamp set, and then again I'm going to pop it down onto a regular 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch side fold card base. Now these were just really fun, quick cards to put together. I hope that you take a look, have a look through your stencil set, see if you can see what they're used for, and then see if you can change it up. Whatever it's labeled or you have traditionally used it for, can you think of another use for that stencil or another way that you could recreate it or use it for a completely different occasion? So I challenge you and see what you can come up with. And if you'd like to post the results, you can post them in my Facebook group called Come Crafting with Natasha over on Facebook. We would love to have you there. And if you don't want to post, we'd love to have you there, even just so that you can see everybody's amazing, beautiful creations that they post. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye.